You know, this is quite an experience. We're willing in an experiment. We're attempting to take this kind of journey together. And it's quite humbling that you've come back and are part of this still. And in addition to welcoming us, and we have a new baby back here. So for the whole Crecci family that's here. And I wanted to welcome those that happen to be watching on the internet. Some of our own members in the church have been able to come, but they're watching week after week. We heard from Cameron. Cameron wrote to us, was one of the first ones that ever wrote to us all the way from Australia when we first started the Gospel of John. And he's written off and on through the years and kept us abreast where they moved from one town to another city, and heard from him since we last met. They've had a baby in their family, wanted to let us know, and they had moved out of finally apartment living to having their own home. And we've heard from Alicia again. We've heard from Dylan in Perth, Australia. Edwin in Puerto Rico went 5 months without electricity after that hurricane went through there couple of years ago. We heard last week from Ignatius, also in Perth, Australia. Must be a movement of God going on in Australia. David from Bloomington, Illinois. He wrote to tell us about a birth of a child in their lives, a baby in their home. Johnny from Ardmore came up and he connected with us a year or so ago, and is now a catechumen in an Orthodox church closer than we are to him to drive. And then just yesterday we heard from Douglas in Oak Harbor, the state of Washington, that is joining us and watching. So God bless each of you, and God bless those of you that are watching, whether it happens to be 2019 or whatever, as long as this is on the internet, whoever might be happening to stop by. Tonight is our third session together. And we start then, I should have brought one of your pages up with me so I could tell you all where we are. It should say the part 1, the chosen tree. Page 39 in your handout notes. Those of you watching, we don't have anything published yet. This is coming hot off the typewriter week by week as we go. Whether or not it ever ends up on Amazon.com, we'll see after it's over. So if you're watching this in the future, you might want to check with Amazon.com and see if there's some content. Chapter 3, then, the serpent's tree. Adam and Eve chose the tree upon which they wanted to build their lives. What page are we on? 49? 51. Okay, 51. It'll really be helpful. I know it's hard to get here by 7, but the closer we get to it, with this being passed out every week, it's harder to figure out. So, or we'll do our best to get out before 9 o'clock anyway, so it's okay. They chose the tree they wanted to build their lives on. They chose the world they wished to live in, the world they wanted for their children, their children's children, all of their offspring and descendants to live in. We live in the world they chose. Their choice was a real choice. Their free will was quite real. You see, free will has consequences. Choices are real because the consequences are real. Choosing between chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream is not so much a choice as a preference. But to choose to eat ice cream regardless of its flavor when one is a diabetic is a real choice with real consequences. Come on in. We're on page what now? 60? I don't know, 52. Find out from somebody. I need someone in the back holding up page numbers, I guess. In the movie The Fiddler on the Roof, there is a scene in which a university student is talking to all the old men of the village. And he says, "There is more to life than talk. You should know about events in the outside world." And then one of the old men scolds that young man, saying, "Why should I break my head about the outside world? Let the outside world break its own head." To which then Tevi looks around at the men and goes, "He's right." Well, then the university student replies again, "You can't close your eyes to what's happening in the world." And Tevi looks at him and looks at the old men around and said, "You know, he's right." And at this point, a third man objects, "He's right and he's right. They both can't be right." To which Tevi wisely replies, "You know, you're also right." Well, the two trees cannot both be right. They are opposites. They are contradictory. They are categorically different. They create different worlds with different consequences. In the midst of paradise was planted a tree teeming with life. How necessary it is to understand what is meant by that tree whose fruit was life. Now we shall postpone our discussion of this tree teeming with life until we get to part 2, the tree not chosen. We're dealing with the tree that got chosen. On the other hand, there was a death-giving tree whose fruit was both good and evil. It too was in the center of paradise. These two trees could not occupy the same place at the center of paradise. If we allow one to be at the center, the other must be excluded. Now this is so basic, we miss it. If we allow one tree to be at the center, the other must be excluded. There is only one center that creates a circle. There is only one center that creates, defines, and brings into existence its kind of world, a world that embodies and expresses the identity of its particular center. Each different center brings into existence its own different world. St. Gregory of Nyssa expresses this difference between the two trees and the world each creates in terms of alternatives. The alternative between the abundance of that which is needful and naturally present versus privation, the loss or absence of that which is needful and naturally present. There are two trees at the center of paradise, he says, one there by nature and the other coming afterwards by privation. For the alternation of life and death occurs through participation and deprivation with regard to the same thing. Whoever dies to good lives for evil, and he who dies to evil lives for virtue. Now let us pause to ponder. The choice between these two trees is not a choice between equal alternatives, such as a choice between apple or cherry pie, a choice between checkers or chess, nor is it a choice between different alternatives, such as going swimming or reading a book. These two trees are mutually and ontologically related. They are ontological alternatives such that one deprives the other of what is ontologically necessary for it to exist in actuality. The choice of the one will deny the other's very existence. It cancels it out. We've got lights on in this room. Now, if Rick were standing over there at the light switch and I said, turn off the lights, we would be in darkness. You can't have light and darkness simultaneously in the room. Okay, you get the point. One cancels the other out. One doesn't just cancel it out, it makes it not exist. That's what we mean by this kind of ontological alternative. These two trees share a mutual exclusivity. To choose one is to automatically exclude the other from existence. The consequences are so categorically different, so mutually exclusive, they are likened to the difference between life and death. The consequences are so real and contradictory that Gregory of Nyssa says that in this choice, our very life has become death, for in a way our life has died. By death, therefore, man exchanged true life for this mortal life. This life, the only life we now know. There is no middle ground. It is not a choice between door number 1 and door number 2, as if we are in a neutral place. Paradise already existed. A world of life, teeming with life, existed outwardly from the tree of life at its center. The other tree was an alternative to the first tree. They could have one or the other, but they couldn't have both. In order to have one, they had to give up the other. In order to have life, they had to give up death. In order to have death, they had to give up life. They chose a life of dying in death over a life of living in life. Adam and Eve gave up what they had in order to get what they did not have. They traded in life for knowledge, but not all knowledge. They traded in life for a very special kind of knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil. They traded in life for knowledge, a special kind of knowledge whose byproduct was death. Well, in what way, in what manner did true life become simply mortal life? In what way is the world we live in the world of death? In what way are we living in death? How is it that this single choice inaugurated and brought to life death itself? Our questions, these questions, bring us face to face with the mystery of paradise. What exactly is paradise? What kind of trees are these? How do they create such radically different worlds? And finally, what kind of knowledge is this knowledge of good and evil, whose byproduct is death? Those are our questions. The tree chosen by Adam and Eve. What page are we on?
54.
54. I can read 5:4. Thank you. 54 for those that just walked in. The tree chosen by Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve chose the second of the two trees. Let us consider what we know about this tree. Now, I've got it written there in Greek with English translated words underneath for the simple reason to slow us down to ponder what it says. If we had it only in English, we'd just rattle it off and we'd hear the story. We've already heard so long, we don't even hear the words anymore. So you're going, well, I don't want it. That's why we're doing it. To turn aside and see what it is that we've never seen before. And sprouted God out of the earth all trees that were pleasurable or pleasing in sight, to sight, in appearance, and were good to eat. And the tree of life in the middle of the paradise, and the tree of the realizing knowledge of good and evil. Notice in particular the last of Genesis 2:9. And the tree of the realizing knowledge of good and evil. In this verse, 2:9, we have that term in Greek, the two adini, the realizing is used. It is found here in 2:9, but the term is not found later in 2:17. But from the tree of the to know good and evil, you may not eat of it. Nor is it found in Genesis 3:5 when Satan uses the term knowing good and evil. The single use of adini, therefore, stands out like a sentinel on a hill, calling for us to notice. Adini is a perfect infinitive. The perfect tense in the Greek language means a present condition resulting from a past action. For example, I have learned my lesson. Means I now know something from what I have experienced in the past. Something happened in the past that still exists in the present. Something in the past has taught us something we still know. This tree, the second tree, is therefore the tree from which to have learned the knowledge of good and evil. This is the tree that has taught us the knowledge of good and evil. This tree did not teach us all knowledge. This tree taught us only one particular kind of knowledge, and only one way of knowing and creating that knowledge that we now say we know. It doesn't teach us all knowledge. It only teaches us one kind of knowledge, one way of knowing that kind of knowledge. This is the tree from which we learn the knowledge of good and evil. The command was, do not eat from the tree from which you will be taught the knowledge of good and evil. Leave that tree alone. This particular tree will teach us a particular way of seeing, a particular way of knowing, and thus a particular way of thinking. Do not eat from this tree, which will teach you to see according to how it wants you to see, will cause you to think the way it wants you to think, cause you to only know what it wants you to know, and cause you to call knowledge what it says knowledge is. This is the tree that teaches us the knowledge of good and evil. This is the tree that makes possible our being taught the knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve chose a world in which they and us are taught to know good and evil. Into such a world we have been born and now live. A world that teaches us to know good and evil. That is, we have been born into a world that teaches us a particular way of knowing. Its version of how to know, and teaches us its kind of knowledge, the knowledge produced by this version of how to know something. This special way of how to know and the knowledge that comes from using this way is the knowledge of good and evil. This tree teaches a single way to know that creates only its particular version of knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil. Well, our own experience in this world of good and evil. The world around us is our world. It is the only world we know. We are born into this world. It is the only world we have ever known. And we take this world to be normal. We have forgotten this world is not paradise. It is not the world created by the tree of life. The way we see the world around us, the way we think about the world around us, the way we know the world around us, is the way the serpent's tree taught us how to see, how to think, and how to know. The only world we know is a world created by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This world we were reared in is a world based on the knowledge of good and evil. And we don't know, or we are unaware that we have been taught to know our world in only a certain way. We are unaware we have been taught a particular limited way to know. Now, anyone in the room this evening or watching on the internet that is old enough to notice the difference notices that the world we know has changed since we were children. How people behave has changed in our lifetime. The behavior of the world has changed. What was normal for us is no longer normal. In fact, what is now thought of as normal is abnormal to most of us. But let us consider for a moment. This world that is now abnormal to us is the only world our children or our grandchildren know. This is their normal world. It is easy for us to see that the world around us today is a world created by the serpent's tree. What we have failed to see is that the world of our childhood, the normal world back then, was also a world created by the serpent's tree. Now absorb that. The only world any of us have ever lived in is a world created by the serpent's tree. We have eaten from the tree that teaches us how to think the way we think, that teaches us what to call knowledge, to prize this knowledge as knowledge, and to dismiss everything else as something other than knowledge. Our world is normal to us because it taught us what to call normal. Today's world is normal to our grandchildren because it is teaching our grandchildren what they shall call normal. Wow, that's a sobering thought. This is the serpent's tree that creates the world we live in. The world hasn't gotten worse. It has a new normal. The issue is not comparing one normal against another normal. The issue is how to step outside of our world, to know what the world does, and to see how it is that it does what it does. Here it is, the world, the serpent's world. We're in it, we don't know it. It's taught us everything we know because we are looking at it through the eyes it's given us to see. And somehow our job and what we're doing here on Monday nights in this class isn't to come in and argue about our normal world of our childhood and the abnormal world out there today. We're not here to debate and discuss one version of normal with a different normal. How in the world can we, oops, that's a lousy arrow, step outside of it and look at it and reflect on it, looking back at it to see what in the world this is? What has the serpent's tree created? How does it do what it does and end up teaching us this particular limited, with our blinders on, way of viewing it, seeing it, living in it? All the so-called normals are simply different versions of the world created by placing the serpent's tree at the center of our lives. All the normal versions are all abnormal when compared to paradise, the world created by the other tree, the tree of life. Every normal to somebody is abnormal when you compare it to that other tree and the world it created called paradise. This is abnormal to this. That's abnormal. The alternative isn't between one version of normal and another version of normal. It's between these two, life and death. They are categorically different. One creates life, the other one creates by deprivation, by depriving everything that is here and necessary to give us this, and vice versa. It is difficult to consider our relationship with our world because it's the only world that we have. It is the only world that we know. It is the only world we have ever known. Obviously, you know I'm not just talking about green grass and sky and the physical universe. Some of us may have moved from one country to another, from one culture to another. And like the choice of ice creams, these differences in country and cultural are preferences. Albeit real, they nonetheless are preferences within this world chosen for us by Adam and Eve. So how do we step back to our beginning? How do we step back to the time prior to this world teaching us the knowledge of good and evil, prior to this world teaching us its version of knowledge? How do we step outside this world and see this world for what it is? To unmask the teacher as Dorothy unmasked the wizard hidden behind his curtain in Oz. The teacher that teaches the world the knowledge of good and evil, the serpent. How do we enter into a domain which our habits of thought do not make immediately accessible to us? To step out of the only world we know is to call into question the singular interpretation of the world that this world has taught us. Who were we before this world taught us, told us who we are? Before this world made us who we are? What is the account of our own origin and the origin of this world in which we live? Let us go back to the beginning. Our own beginning, before we were taught, before we learned our habit, our way of thinking of the world. Was there, is there another habit of thinking? A different way of understanding the world? Let us seek to return to the beginning, to the birth of meaning itself. Let us return to the moment before the choice was made, before the deadly fruit was eaten. Let us step outside ourselves that we might discover what this world has done to us and how it has done it and how it does it. Well, we have to understand about naked and hiding. The story tells us that after they made their choice, they did two things. First, they knew they were naked, and secondly, they hid. And again, we're going to stumble through the translation. And enabled to perceive. The eyes of the two were enabled to perceive. The Greek word used there is the same word used in Luke 24 when the risen Savior opened the eyes of the apostles to understand the Scriptures. Adam and Eve's eyes have been opened to see things differently. You see, it's either going to be the risen Savior opening our eyes, or it's going to be Satan opening our eyes. Someone's opening our eyes and showing us something. And they knew that they were naked, and they sewed leaves, fig leaves, and made themselves aprons or loincloths. Genesis 3:8, and they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in paradise in the afternoon, and they hid, Adam and Eve, or Adam and his wife, Adam and his woman, hid from the personal presence of the Lord God in the middle of the tree of paradise. Genesis 3:9, and called the Lord God to Adam and said to him, Adam, where are you? And he said to him, your voice I heard as you were walking in paradise, and I was afraid because naked I am, and I hid. And he said to him, who proclaimed, declared? It's the same word used in the New Testament, that it will be the Holy Spirit who will declare to you the things concerning me. Either Satan's doing the preaching or God is. You see the alternatives here? Alternatives. Who preached to you that you're naked? Surely not from the tree which I commanded you, that of all the trees leave that one alone. You can eat from all of them, but from that one you shall never eat. Surely you didn't eat from that one. You see, Adam and Eve's choice was a real choice between ontologically exclusive alternatives marked with deprivation. Their choice deprived them, stripped them of their identity. They no longer knew who they were. That is, they do not now know who they are. The identity they had with each other is now changed. They now know each other in a different way. That is to say, they don't know how to relate to each other. They don't know who they are. They don't know who the other is. They are naked. They are exposed without an identity, without safety, without protection. They now hide behind their own mask. Not only do they now not know who they are in relation to each other, when they hear the one who is looking for them, they realize they no longer know who their Creator is. For the first time in their existence, they now know fear. They are afraid of the one who is. They hide out of fear. Fear now defines their relationship with the one who is. Being naked is so much more than not having clothing on. Why do you say that you are naked but hide your sin? Do you really think I see only your body, but do not see your heart and your thoughts? Do you really think you can hide from me? Do I not know what you have done? St. Simeon, the new theologian. It is not our physical nakedness that we hide. We are afraid of each other. We are afraid of our Creator. We are afraid someone is going to find out who we are and what we have done. We are afraid others will know the truth. I'm afraid you won't like me. I'm afraid I will be rejected for being unacceptable, so I hide. I hide behind my jokes. I hide behind being really good at something. I hide behind knowing important people. I hide by earning your approval. I hide by being religious, by quoting the Bible, by quoting the saints. I hide by being busy. I'm on this board and that board. I'm in this club and that club. I hide the fact that I am empty. I hide the fact I have nothing to offer. And sometimes I'm very good at hiding my own motives, my own agendas from myself. I become so good at hiding, so good at lying about who I am, I don't even know when I'm making excuses for my own behavior. We are deprived. We have experienced deprivation. We have lost something we once possessed. We have no memory of what we have lost, but we know we lost it. We're naked. Others are smarter, prettier, younger, gifted, talented, popular. We are exposed. We are now the great pretenders. We overcompensate, pretending to be who we know we are not. Being naked is a metaphor. Our nakedness is iconic. Our nakedness, our visible nakedness, reveals our invisible nakedness. Deprived of our covering, we are exposed. Deprived of those realities necessary for life to exist, we are now deathly naked. In the middle of the tree, Adam and Eve concealed themselves in the middle of the tree in paradise. The same term for tree in Greek, Zulu, is used in verse 3:8. That is used every other time the word tree or trees is mentioned in the first 3 chapters of Genesis, whether the term is singular or plural. There's only one word in the Greek, and it's just singular, but it's translated plural or singular. So if the Zulu is translated in the plural, then Adam and Eve hid in the midst of the trees. That is, they hid in the middle of a forest, surrounded and hidden by all the trees. However, if Zulu is translated in the singular, then Adam and Eve hid in the midst of the tree that they had chosen. This is the tree they bet their lives on. This is the tree they had chosen to be the middle of their world. They had staked their claim and their lives on this tree. They hid in the middle of this tree, covered by its leaves, surrounded by the tree, immersed in the tree. They hid in the middle of the tree they had chosen. The phantom tree. The serpent's tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, is a phantom. St. Gregory of Nyssa summarily declines a literal interpretation of the second tree. Adam and Eve can eat the fruit of every tree in paradise except the imaginary fruit from the imaginary tree. It has no ontological substance. It exists like smoke. When you pass your hand through it, there is nothing there. This tree has no power, no substance, no actual existence. It is only the possibility, a potentiality, an idea not yet manifested and materialized in space and time. It is the serpent who brings the imaginary tree to the attention of Adam and Eve. Eve could see the tree in her mind, how exquisite and how beautiful it was. She could imagine how juicy and delightfully sweet the fruit would taste. The second tree began to exist in the minds of Adam and Eve. The serpent sold them and us an idea, the possibility of what might be. It was Adam and Eve that bought what the serpent was selling. They grasped the vision of what they might look like, what they might become. They consumed the idea. The idea took shape in their bodies, in their lives. It was they who gave life to the idea, who gave power to the idea. It was the ontological existence of Adam and Eve that gave life to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam gave life to his own death. Good and evil have no ontological existence. Murder, adultery, stealing do not exist. Only the idea of murder, adultery, lust, and stealing exist until we give them life. They do not exist until we give them life in our own bodies, in our own lives. We give life to these ideas. We embody the ideas. We incarnate the serpent's ideas within ourselves. We picture the ideas in our heads. It is delightful. We play with it. We toy with it. It is pleasing to consider. Imagine how wonderful this is going to taste, how wonderful it must feel. And the visions of sugar plums dance in our heads. Desire ignites within us. We can all but taste it. Having fully embraced it in our minds, in our hearts, excitedly we embrace it physically. We grasp it, we eat it, we consume it. We give life to it. It now clothes the nakedness of our desire with the clothes of our new identity of what we have chosen to become. Before we chose, we were already clothed with the identity of life. We lived in a world of life. When we chose the other tree, we lost that identity. The clothing of the first tree. In that moment, without the identity, the life, the clothing from that first tree, we realized we had lost it. We were naked. We are naked and without identity. This is really heavy stuff, I know. Yeah. So why don't we I saw someone's eyes just glaze over. I had a stopping point picked, but I don't think I'm going to make it to it. So forgive me, I didn't stop 5 minutes ago. Let's stop now. We'll take a break. What page are we on your pages?
64.
64. We'll come back after our break on 64. We are naked and without identity. We're also hungry and tired, so let's go see if there's some goodies over there to eat. We'll come back in a little bit. Thank you. We are naked and without identity, without clothing. We have stripped ourselves bare, and we now put on these new clothes that mask who we are. We hide our nakedness with our new identities behind the leaves of the chosen tree. We take pride in our leaves. We flaunt the quality and the quantity of our leaves, being rich only in leaves. We hide the poverty of our nakedness. If we are to discover the truth about our world, the truth about this tree, we must not be afraid to discover the truth. We must not hide behind the leaves of science and philosophy, even the leaves of religious theories, behind the leaves of explanations and excuses. Instead of hiding in the center of what we take for granted, let us journey outward through the opinions until we reach the boundary of the world created by this tree, the tree which hides from us our true identity. Let us step outside the boundary and return to our origin. From outside the boundary, let us see the world we have lived in all our lives. It is the tree of knowledge. During the Watergate hearings by the United States Senate, investigating the role of President Richard Nixon in the break-in in the Democratic National Committee headquarters in 1972, one of the frequently asked questions was, what did the president know and when did he know it? The world in which we live is a world based on the acquiring of knowledge. At the basic level, we must ask, what do we know about knowledge itself? What is knowledge? What is it that we actually know? How do we know what we know? Is there only one kind of knowledge to be known? These are basic questions at the core of our identity. The branch of philosophy known as epistemology ponders these very questions. These are epistemological questions, questions about knowledge. What is knowledge? What do we know? How do we know it? The Genesis story of the two trees gives us 4 helpful clues in understanding how the world answers knowledge questions, epistemological questions. Boy, someone's eyes just crossed. When we used to deal with eschatological, now we're dealing with epistemological. You're going, wow. We're going to have to start breaking out the Excedrin PM. I can see it coming. The headache. The story of the two trees gives us helpful clues in understanding these epistemological questions and the world that it creates as a consequence. And the 4 clues are these. Number 1, the tree of knowledge is a serpentine tree that gives us knowledge by division. The tree of knowledge, number 2, is a sensate tree that gives us knowledge by our senses. Number 3, the tree of knowledge is a seductive tree that gives us knowledge that appeals to us. And number 4, the tree of knowledge is a judgmental tree that gives us the ability to decide what is good and evil. Using our 4 clues, we return to those epistemological questions. What do we know, and how do we know it? How do we even know how to know? Well, the first clue, the first place to begin, the tree of knowledge is a serpentine tree. It's the serpent's tree. Now, the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field. The term cunning, phronimos, means using one's wits effectively, acting shrewdly. The serpent shrewdly defined knowledge to achieve his own agenda. Knowledge became what the serpent meant by knowledge. He defined the term. He filled it with meaning. Consider these other terms. The Greek preposition dia means through. We have the word diameter, dia, through the center, across the middle of a circle, dia. By extension, when joined with other words, it means to divide. Here's some examples in Greek that shape our thinking in the Western world. Diabeno means to go through or to cross, like to cross the Red Sea, to divide by going through something. Diabolo means to throw through, to divide a group or the opinion of a group by throwing into the discussion false or slanderous charges. Here's a group, a body deliberating, having a serious conversation, and you suddenly throw in slander or an accusation of off-the-wall behavior by somebody, and suddenly the chaos that happens. You divide the group by slander. Diablepo means to see through something as opposed to looking but not seeing it, to be looking intently and to see what is really going on, the dynamic that is happening, to see through it. Diabole is the noun slander, from diabolo, above, to throw. Diabole is the false charge thrown at an opponent in order to divide the opinion against the opponent. Diabolos is the one who throws the slander. The slanderer, diabolos, who hurls, who divides into factions and introduces hostility between them. Diabolos is often translated into English as the devil. Diabolos, if we look at it, you throw off the OS, which is just a Greek nominative ending, and you've got diabol, and in many, many languages, the B and the V become interchangeable sounds. So if we do that, we've got diavol, and it's real easy to get D-I-V-E-L out of divol, the devil. Diabolos, the devil, the one who divides with slander and innuendo. Then we have a useful word that we're all familiar with diagnosis, the transliteration of dia, through, and gnosis, knowledge. It is a compound word. Diagnosis is the knowledge that comes by sorting through the visible evidence. It is the knowledge that comes by dividing something into its parts and investigating the parts and the interplay of the parts. It is the knowledge of an illness that comes from dividing the illness into its symptoms, with the result that a particular combination of symptoms equals a particular illness. Once an illness has been diagnosed and the illness identified, now known, then a particular course of action, a treatment associated as curative for this particular illness may then be prescribed. Diakrino, I think this is on your additional sheet there, is to look for the differences between things or people, to distinguish, discriminate, to make a distinction between something. Having determined there are differences, a decision of judgment is made regarding the differences. Oh, I'm going to compare this with that, and well, they are a little bit different. And then you place a value judgment on the differences. And the term is also translated in the New Testament as the word for doubt. You see, making a distinction of value between persons or things can cause one to doubt whether one wants to purchase the cheaper one after all, or whether it is wise to associate with the person one judged inferior. So you doubt whether you want to associate with something you have now judged to be less than the other. And the list goes on with these dia words. The serpent is diabolos, the slanderer, the accuser, the one who divides and separates. What does he do with Adam and Eve and their relationship with their Creator? The slander divides the relationship. Under the pretext of helping, the serpent suggests ideas and cunningly leads us astray into subtle half-truths, not knowing how to detect that we are secretly being seduced. In our gullibility, we believe and act upon the innuendo. As in a debate, the older, wiser, experienced in knowing how to win, the serpent easily is able to conquer by his powers of persuasion, whereas the youth of Adam and Eve were no match for his cunning. Diabolos, the slanderer, accuser, secretly seduces us by offering us a plausible alternative explanation as to why the one who is doesn't want us to eat from the serpentine tree. The one doesn't want us to be like him. In one fell swoop, we are divided from the one who is, and simultaneously we are divided from our own identity. In a single instant, we are now dissatisfied with our own humanity, disappointed with who we are and the purpose of our existence. Instead of being the highest of creation, we now see ourselves as inferior to the one. We now distrust the one. His motives are false, self-serving, in forbidding us to eat from the snake's tree. He doesn't want us to be equal with him, so he denies us access to the snake's tree. It is by asserting ourselves and from eating of the serpent's tree that we will achieve our equality with the one who is. Instead of seeing what we have, we now see ourselves as inferior. After all, if we're not good enough to be like God, then we must be inferior. We would have access to of every tree in the garden, in the paradise in the first place. The fact we don't have access to every tree proves we were made inferior to begin with. Pow. New ideas, whole new way of thinking now explodes in our head. Wow. Equal access is proof of equality. If all employees were equal, everyone would have a key to the executive washroom. Everyone would have access to the executive parking lot. Equal access is not only the proof of equality, equal access is the means of creating equality. The very act of seizing, grasping, and claiming the snake's tree as our own, as demonstrated by eating its fruit, will make us equal to the one who denied us access to the serpentine tree. Just who does the one think he is? We'll show him we're not to be trifled with. We'll show him we're not inferior. We'll eat the fruit and create our own world. And in a defiant act of self-will and self-determination, we reach out, take hold of, and grasp the fruit of the serpent's tree. We grasp knowledge, the kind of knowledge offered by the serpent's tree. Diabolos, the slanderer, accuser, is also the divider who goes through us like a bowling ball, striking the pins at the bowling alley, violently dividing and scattering us, turning us into an angry mob, executing others in the name of vigilante justice. Or Diabolos, the gentle whisperer, moves among us like a swizzle stick, stirring the glass, all the while whispering, "Let's you and him fight." He stands up quietly, watching from the sidelines, as friends betray friends, communities split, and nations destroy themselves from within. This is our first clue in approaching these knowledge questions, epistemological questions. What do we know and how do we know it? Knowledge from the serpent's tree of knowledge is divisive, however you pronounce it, and absolutist in behaving as if it is the only knowledge there is. This is our first clue in stepping outside the serpentine world and beginning to see the serpentine world from the outside looking in, seeing it for what it is. We are divided from the one who is. We are now dissatisfied with who we are in the world of life. Given the choice, we choose the alternative to the one who is, the alternative to the world of life, and the alternative to whom we were in the world of life. In the words of Milton's Satan, the mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where? If I be still the same, and what I should be, all but less than he whom thunder has made greater, here at least we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy. He will not drive us hence. Here we might be secure, might reign secure. And in my choice to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. And so, in the words of Milton Satan, staring at the tree in our own imagination, we reach out, grasp the fruit, grasp the alternative. It is better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Well, that's a wonderful place to stop this evening. This has been heavy stuff. You can see that we're slowly investigating paradise and these two trees. We're not giving anybody easy answers because we're on a journey together. It is an experiential journey where all of us have a chance to go, and begin to experience for yourself what these questions mean, and beginning to see ourselves stepping out and looking at the world we live in. Well, next week then we'll tackle our fourth session, the sensate tree, the tree based on our senses. God bless you for being here. Thank you, and be careful on your way home. Good night.